Welcome to the Your Most Interesting Story podcast. My name's Rob, and each episode I intend to serve you up a big old piece of real-life pie as we hear about and dig into the most interesting thing that's happened to someone in their life. These are first-hand, true stories told by everyday people. This episode's guest believes she may have narrowly escaped an untimely death, but not in the way you'd expect. Let's hear Laura's most interesting story.
My most interesting story begins in the summer of 2006. It was a holiday weekend, the 4th of July to be exact, and my husband and I were making a 2-hour trip south from where we live. Beautiful sunny day. We actually had a convertible at the time, so we had the top down and we had the radio blaring, and we were just having a beautiful drive going to his sister's house for a July 4th picnic. En route, we got a phone call from his sister saying to redirect, that their mother had been taken to the hospital. She was 90 years old at the time, suffered macular degeneration, severe cardiac health issues, and just could no longer live, even with assisted living. So she was in a nursing home facility. We were going to pick her up from there to take her to the picnic with us. So we went to the emergency room instead of to Ron's sister's, and she seemed so with it and so perfectly fine. They still had her in the triage area of the emergency room, and she was laughing and joking, but then she got very serious. And she took my husband's hand and she said, "Ron, I'm not going to make it out of this when my 9 lives are up." And we were just like, "Oh, come on, modern medicine, you're going to be fine." As it turns out, they did admit her then to the hospital. She had an intestinal blockage. They medically tried to dissolve it because she was not a good surgical candidate. They had taken her off any solid food and even anything to drink in order to try to get this blockage to move. So in the first couple of days, it was really nice because there was so much family in the area. The children and the grandchildren and even great-grandchildren came to visit. And it was essentially a goodbye, sadly. As the week progressed, we took turns staying with her, my husband, his sister, and myself. And it was determined that the blockage wasn't going anywhere and there was nothing they could do for her medically. That was really tough to take. And I remember my husband saying, "You're kidding me, right?" Because all they offered was a morphine drip.
Given the patient's age and other significant health issues, the medical team was likely following a conservative approach to morphine administration, balancing effective pain relief with the potential side effects. They also may have been cautious due to possible legal or ethical implications.
He was outraged. He said, "Come on, doc, can you increase the dosage? This just seemed so inhumane and so hard, just really hard." Ethically, legally, the answer was no. They had to follow a protocol. So I remember they moved her to a room way at the end of the hallway, private room. Dinner station was close by, but there was not a soul around. And as I said, we then began taking shifts to stay with her. And her doctor said to us, "I advise you not to do this. This is something you really don't want a memory of." We're old-fashioned people. We're like, no. We just don't walk away from someone on a morphine drip waiting for you to call us and say, "Well, she's gone." So he understood that, but he strongly discouraged it. And I will tell you, it was tough. It was very difficult. She died on July the 11th, exactly 1 week after she was admitted. So on the night of the 10th, I was with her in her room. My husband and his sister had gone to his sister's house. She lived close by. They had been there. We had gone to dinner. And then I went back to the room and they brought in, those big clunky recliner chairs that almost fold back into a bed, but not quite. And they were very lovely and gave me a blanket. And I was trying to read. I will just tell you, there are some things you cannot unsee and some things that you cannot unhear. And death is ugly. It just is. And you've heard people describe death rattles. It's for real. And it's very disturbing. I was determined to stay there. We knew it was close. So I did get up, couldn't read. So I went over and I just stroked her hand a little bit and her forehead. And I just told her, I said, Anna, it's okay. It's okay to let go. Just be at peace. And I said a prayer. And it was very late. So I went back into this big clunky recliner. I got my blanket and I did go to sleep. I don't know how, but I did. And the way I was situated in this chair, she was laying in the bed and I was horizontal to her, just looking at her. But I did go to sleep. And this is where it gets interesting. All of a sudden, found myself in the top right-hand corner of the room, looking down on her in the bed and me in my recliner.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, huh.
You're having an out-of-body experience.
Correct.
An out-of-body experience is described by many spiritual traditions and New Age beliefs as an event where an individual's consciousness or soul temporarily separates from their physical body, often perceived as floating above or traveling to different realms. While some esoteric and Eastern practices view it as a sign of spiritual advancement or even an intentional practice, mainstream religions tend to approach out-of-body experiences with caution, emphasizing spiritual safety.
And I am aware. I describe it as chatter, but it's not really chatter. It's not really words. It's just this noise and just this sense of something going on. And the sense was, y'all got the wrong one here. It's not me you came for. And it's like, again, chatter, nothing discernible except just a feeling. It was like, uh-oh. Obviously, I didn't verbally say, you've got the wrong one. It was just a thought. And my interpretation of the moment was a big uh-oh. And more chatter, more noise, more something. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting straight up in my recliner. And Anna's there. Now she's still breathing. But I know in that moment is when her spirit left her. I was so shaken up by the whole thing that I left the room. And I felt like she wasn't there and it was okay. I really don't recall what time of night this was, but I couldn't wait for the morning. My husband was to come to relieve me, but I called them early and said, you both need to come to the hospital this morning and say your goodbyes. At that time, I didn't share any of this with them because I was so shaken up. And I had to really question, did that really happen? Was that for real? they did come to the hospital, and I really couldn't wait to get out of there. So they went in and they had their goodbyes. I was already on my way to my sister-in-law's, and they left to go to the hospital cafeteria to have breakfast. And it was while they were there that her body did give it up and she passed. And I don't know how things work in this world. I mean, I know her soul was gone, but it was like the body was waiting for that last goodbye. And then when they left the room, she passed.
You almost got Grim Reapered on accident. Is that what we're saying here?
Correct. Yes.
Crazy. And I wonder what that chatter was. Like, they say all organizations have problems, but that's like a pretty big mess up right there. Like, who's on the other end? Like, the Grim Reaper dude's like, all right, there's like 2 women in here. I think I got the right one. And they're like, no, come on. Like, and then you're like, hey, what's up? And then they're like, oh shit, she can hear us. And then they put you back in your body. Man, it's a good thing that you like spoke up, you know?
Were they newbies? Were they interns? First assignment? I don't know.
First day Grim Reaping.
The Grim Reaper is a symbolic figure that's often depicted as a skeletal being cloaked in a dark robe and carrying a scythe. This entity personifies death and is believed to escort the souls of the deceased to the afterlife. There are actual accounts from individuals who claim to have seen what they believe to be the Grim Reaper. These sightings often occur during near-death experiences, moments of severe illness, or in highly stressful situations. People report seeing a dark, cloaked figure, sometimes with a skeletal face, which they interpret as the Grim Reaper, symbolizing impending death. When did you tell Ron and his sister about this?
It took me a while, several days, but it was before the funeral. And I said, you may have a problem believing what I'm going to tell you. I told them exactly what I said to you. And it was like the head tilt and now wait, say that again. And so I did. And then just the nod of the heads. And my sister-in-law says, well, I believe it. And my husband's not a great believer in anything, but he said, I do too. The credibility of it all is just that they know me, and I'm not one to, make things up like that. Until recently, they're the only 2 people I ever mentioned this to. Just last week, as I was approaching you about my most interesting story, I told a third person in my life, who's my very best friend since childhood. And I said, I've been holding out on you. I've got a story to tell you, and tell me what you think. She said, wow, I absolutely know you and trust that what you say is true and real, that it really happened.
When you were looking down on your body, were you like sleeping in that chair?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll never forget what I saw from that upper corner of the room. And everything was the same. I had a yellow blanket, and I think the chair was green. Of course, Anna was in a hospital gown and white sheets. And it was visual. There was sound.
So you've used the term chatter. Does that imply a conversation?
There was a back and forth.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
So the trainee and the instructor, perhaps.
Yeah.
Did you feel like these entities were in the room with you?
Oh, yes, right there in the corner with me. I felt like that was maybe the exit point.
How long do you think you were out of your body?
I would say less than a minute, maybe even less than 30 seconds. It was pretty quick.
When you were out of your body, did you feel any emotions? Like, were you scared?
No, I had no fear, actually. There was no fear. I don't want to make light of it because to me, it was very real. I don't want to laugh at the oops moment. To say that they were in training or whatever, it's kind of funny, but it was almost like that. Maybe they've never done this before, And, okay, I'll give you another sense. In that chatter, I'm going to say 2 were there. But then there was a consultation. Not right there with those two, but there was like far off or somewhere another entity involved.
Boss? Yeah, we've got a little problem down here.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, if you hadn't, quote unquote, spoken up, I wonder how far you would have gone.
Really?
Imagine what you could have seen.
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been interesting.
Since this has happened, have you noticed any difference at all as to how you perceive things?
No, I will say I've always been sensitive. I've always been kind of tuned in. I've been to people's homes that there's spirit activity, if that's what you want to call it. In fact, my sister-in-law owned a lodge, and it was an historic building. And I would go and help her prepare for a weekend here and there where she would have guests. And there was one part in a stairwell that there was always, again, this chatter and just this sense of you're not alone, but never threatening. And so at one point I said that to her. She said, "Oh my gosh." She said, "I have two other friends that say exactly the same thing in exactly the same spot." And even as a kid, I mean, this has just always been a sensitivity of mine. But I've not been fearful.
Did that experience cause you to have a different perspective on the universe or the world we live in?
No. You know, it wasn't some big life-changing moment. I just take it for what it was. It was just a really interesting experience. It might seem conflicting because I am a Christian. I was born and raised Catholic, and a lot of what I'm saying would be considered taboo or wrong, but I'd never believed that.
Based on my research, the Catholic Church would likely advise Laura to pray and seek guidance from a spiritual director or priest to help her correctly interpret these situations and to be sure she's not being misled by negative spiritual influences. Are you glad this happened?
Am I glad? I can't say I'm glad. It's interesting to me. Again, it was not a fearful experience. Actually, I am. I will say I'm glad to know, because I do know in my heart, that was a happy ending for her. She was always like, when it's your time, it's your time. There's nothing you can do about it.
And you were there for her time.
I was there for her time.
And that's going to bring this story to an end. Remember to check out the YMIS Podcast Instagram account for show-related pics. Your Most Interesting Story is available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. If you'd like to support the show, you can like, rate, review, share, and/or subscribe. Or you could visit our website where you can also let us know if you'd like to tell us your most interesting story. Just follow the link in our show description. Our email address is ymispodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, be interesting. It's like a Grim Reaper sitcom.
Really? Yeah, you'd think they'd get that right.
Yeah, especially the ones that they send to hospitals. You'd figure they have a lot more experience.
Exactly. Do you think you would have been afraid?
Oh, I would have woke up screaming and the hospital staff would have come running.